It's great to be here at the Marriott in Brooklyn. My name is Scott Galloway. I teach at NYU, and I appreciate your time this morning. I'm going to take you through winners and losers in 2017. Probably the most important thing you can do in this or any lifetime is to buy my book. So please pre-order it. It's my first book, and it's going to be out in October. I work for a firm called L2. We basically marinate in a lot of data. We had developed an algorithm at NYU. This is an accidental business. In academia, you can't get very far without doing research, and I decided to try and assess a brand's digital footprint across 1,250 data points or 4 dimensions: site, e-commerce, social, digital marketing, and mobile. And then we applied that algorithm, those 1,250 data points, to the 2,500 largest brands in the world, put out a ranking of 100 brands, and then about 40 to 100 brands called us and said, who are you and why are you doing this? And so we thought there was a commercial opportunity, raised some money from a great firm called General Catalyst, who's also the backers of Feedvisor, as is the reason I'm here today. So we're, at the end of the day, we're train spotters or bird watchers, and that is we sit in data, and then we like to think we see patterns and trends around not only where brands and retailers are investing their finite capital, but where they're divesting. And it's interesting to talk not only about the winners, about 98% of the oxygen in the room at conferences like this, we sit around and talk about amazing winners. What's just as interesting and informative is who are the losers? Because in a zero-growth economy, which on an inflation-adjusted basis is kind of where we are right now, every time we talk about a company increasing its revenues, there's someone on the wrong end of that. And it's interesting to talk about, okay, who's doing well and who's getting hurt in this quote-unquote era of disruption. So the first thing we want to do is we want to reverse engineer into who's doing well and then understand what do they have in common. What do the winners have in common? So if you look at the private markets, the general algorithm, if you will, for value is you look at the number of users times how engaged they are in the platform or the technology, and that gives you a proxy for the value in the marketplace. It's not even money anymore because people assume if you have a large user base that's growing and they're actively engaged in your product, that we'll figure out a way to monetize it. So the traditional, or the value in the private markets is these things. Now let's look at public companies. There are only 13 companies in the S&P 500 that have outperformed the S&P 500 5 years in a row. So on average, the S&P over the last 5 years has gone up 5% a year. And there's only 13 companies that have been able to go up more than 5% each of the last 5 years. So the first observation is this has become a winner-take-all economy. When there's only 2% of the companies can outperform the standard or the base case for 5 years in a row, it means that there's just a small number of companies killing it and everyone else is fighting over the scraps, which is scary, but that's another presentation. Now, let's look at what these 13 have in common. 9 of the 13 are algorithmically driven. That means they have, similar to what Victor was saying, a machine taking in data from their user experience and then figuring out a way to process it and then spit it back and improve the product. I think of these companies as Benjamin Button companies. For the most part, won't invest or don't want to get involved in a company that isn't aging in reverse. Now, what does that mean? If you think about the titans of yesterday, the Unilevers, the General Motors, did anyone else see that, or am I having a stroke? I think that's a good omen. Anyways, if you're able to suspend the natural order, you're going to grow shareholder value. Estee Lauder and General Motors, when a car or a bottle of Estee Lauder Advanced Night Repair comes off the production line, it immediately starts declining in value. It immediately starts aging. If I were to go back to graduate school to really understand business, I would get a master's in evolutionary biology, not business. I think to understand biology is to understand business. Every business we're going to talk about today is going to die. If you're having a kid, or any of you just recently had kids, you live in a wealthy, educated cohort, I would imagine, your child's life expectancy is 100. If you go back 100 years and look at the Dow 100, the 100 most important companies in the world, only 11 are still alive. There's an 89% mortality rate among companies getting to 100. We're about to pass that. More than 11% of our populace is going to make it past 100. So in sum, every company we talk about here today, your kids are going to outlive. All of these companies are going to die. Some of them, however, have figured out, at least temporarily, this kind of this Botox or this testosterone supplement that stopped the aging process. And that is, every time I turn on Waze, which I did this morning because I didn't know where I was going, it informs the product, and the product that moment gets better for everyone else using it. It doesn't actually decline in value. It increases in value with use. So these companies have suspended the natural order and are like Benjamin Button, and they're aging in reverse. And when I think about my own stock market purchases, I think, has this company figured out a way to use data, implicit and explicit data, to reverse the aging process? And 9 of the 13, I would argue, have done this. 2 of them are infrastructure companies building the stuff for the companies that are aging in reverse. 2 of them are outsourcing companies. So say you aren't aging in reverse. What happens when you get old? What happens to every other tech company? HP, IBM, when they stop, they haven't figured it out, right? They start cutting costs like crazy. And they need great firms to bring them in and cut costs. The largest services firm in the world right now by market cap is Arthur Andersen. And they say we're eccentric strategy, and they have creative, and they have all sorts of different offerings. The bread and butter of their business is coming into companies and cutting costs. They call it zero-based budgeting, right? Where every year, January 1, you start with a company and say, do we need your assistant? Do we need to spend this much on advertising? Do we need this desk? Do we need this conference? And they literally start at 0. So in sum, the winners in our economy right now are either aging in reverse or palliative care, taking care of the dying. And there doesn't seem to be an in-between. And then there's a pharmaceutical company. Pharma always has, or biotech always has, one company that hits it big with a drug and goes crazy. And the interesting thing here, I think the most interesting thing about this slide, other than the Benjamin Button observation, is there's only one brand, Under Armour. And Under Armour just fell off the list based on their stock price in 2017. But if we did this analysis every year since World War II, it would be littered with brands. The algorithm for success in our economy, or massive shareholder value, used to be come up with an average product, come up with these incredibly compelling brand codes, whether it's American, whether it's European and elegant, whether it's hot and young, you can feel young. You can be more like Mike if you drink or wear this shoe. You can be hot and have ripped abs if you drink this light beer. You can be funny and irreverent if you buy this car. You're signaling to the world something. Take that average product, stuff it everywhere in the channel, make sure the channel doesn't totally erode those associations, and pound away at the consumer with these associations and get incredible margins on this product that you're selling at a premium price that's really an average product. And that margin is going to drive a ton of shareholder value. And the economic titans of yesterday, whether it was Unilever or Nike, basically followed this algorithm since World War II. I would argue that the era of brand, if you will, the sun has passed midday. And be clear, I make a nice living, or I've made a nice living, preaching these associations of an average product times the only point of differentiation is these associations, and you build brand equity. My basic rap for 20 of the last 25 years has been brand is really the only way to achieve above market ROI. And I've now decided that that era, I think, is over, and we were entering what I would call this algorithmically driven era. And this reflex reaction around build a brand, that's the right business strategy, I think that's muscle memory that is no longer true. I'm not sure brand building is, in fact, the right strategy. And these great companies that have this competence around brand building are going to have to figure out new tools. So, if we were trying to break it down into 4 quadrants and 2 axes, on one axis we would have the number of receptors. How many people are using your product? And then what do we do with the data they provide us? How intelligent are we with it? So magazines neither have a lot of receptors, nor do they have much intelligence. When I read Vanity Fair over the weekend, there's not a lot of us, theoretically. It's only actually several 100,000 people reading it. And me reading it does nothing to the experience for other readers. There's no intelligence there. Television still has tens of millions of people watching, but they purposely have kept the computer, the CPU, on top of the TV dumb. There's a saying that when you're paid not to understand something, it's easy not to understand it, right? Tobacco companies were paid not to understand the link between tobacco and carcinogens, so they became very good at not understanding that. TV companies in the advertising industrial complex have been paid not to understand. Think about how difficult it is. I was trying to find Better Call Saul last night. I fly in from Florida, I get in around midnight, and the way I relax is I watch this Vince Gilligan shows. I either watch Breaking Bad or I watch Better Call Saul. And even though I watch this thing every week, it took me 2 or 3 minutes to find it. 583, 584, 585. I can find an aerial view of the house of the gaffer on that show within about 0.00055 seconds. And yet TV has purposely decided to dumb down the technology of the CPU on top of your desk because There's no way to increase that intelligence without informing advertisers about who is watching when or not watching, specifically commercials. So as a result, they've been paid not to understand, and they purposely dumb down the intelligence. We have the most unintelligent box in the world sitting on top of our TVs, because the fear has been, if we give advertisers the ability or the intelligence to figure out which 50% of their advertising is not being watched, it'll be bad for us. So we're going to have this incredibly stupid processor on top of the one screen that more people watch than any other screen until 24 months ago. Now the mobile phone has more time than the television. The companies that are killing it are the ones that get tremendous volume of data and then turn it into intelligence and have billions of inputs every day. People say data is the new oil. If that's true, then we are literally swimming or drowning in oil. I find that companies have no shortage of data. What they have a shortage of is intelligence to figure out what to do with it, what data to apply, and then how to build an algorithm that can automatically take all of this data of velocity and then turn it into something better for the consumer. That sounds easy. There's a handful of firms in the world that can do it. It's super difficult. So people say, well, mass customization. This hits those indicators, right? Take data from the end consumer and then design your own shoe. That's not really what we're talking about. There's a small segment of people, I bet 50% of them live here in Brooklyn, who want to design their own Nikes. And the power of Nike and the power of algorithms is someone's ability, or basically the Portland firm's ability, to track your implicit behavior on Nike.com, on the internet, off the internet, and then serve you the perfect shoe at the right time. That's intelligence, as opposed to asking you, do you want a yellow stripe? What kind of insole do you want? That's not really that intelligent. So some of the winners. Uber's a perfect example of this, right? I've noticed, I'm sure you have too. When I fly into LaGuardia at midnight on a Sunday night, it immediately pre-populates in the destination column my home address. You can see where this is going. It's going to start figuring out, if you're going to a certain address, it'll start helping you figure out what you want to buy there. So when you put in the address of a restaurant, I'm fairly certain they're going to start letting you pre-order. And if you put in the address of a retailer, they'll give other retailers or that retailer the opportunity to advertise to try and drive traffic, recognizing that you seem to be in a buying mood, heading somewhere where there's a lot of retail purchasing going on. As a result, this company that's aging in reverse, we've never had a transportation company age in reverse. The moment a 787 comes off the Boeing assembly line, it starts declining in value $100,000 to $200,000 a month, at least. Whereas Uber technically is aging in reverse, and as a result, it's now worth more than Porsche, Audi, and Volkswagen. I actually think Uber's going to be the mother of all write-downs in the next 24 months, but as it stands right now, it's worth more than these unbelievable brands that have taken the better part of a century to build. Spotify ages in reverse. Every time you add a song to your playlist, it updates and makes the experience better for your friends who have similar tastes. It's aging in reverse.
And over 40, have you tried the GNC award-winning innovation designed to invigorate your body and increase your libido? If you're experiencing lower sex drive, general sluggishness, and decreased performance, you need Nugenics.
So, what's the term? As it relates to audio, I have the lamest thing in the world. I have ad-supported Pandora. And I can't figure out if it's either very good or very bad intelligence, but Pandora has decided I have massively low T. And every commercial is encouraging me to take some sort of supplement. And I can't figure out if it's really good intelligence or really bad intelligence. But literally every ad I get on Pandora is talking to me about the lack of manhood I have. That has almost nothing to do with what we're talking about today. So, TripAdvisor. For those who use TripAdvisor a lot, it begins figuring out kind of your economic weight class, where you travel a lot, and it will begin immediately sort of merchandising opportunities in your price range for the areas you go to most. It's aging in reverse, and it has obviously an incredible market cap, greater than a lot of people who've invested in these sort of old economy things called traditional assets. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be a new economy company to do this. There are old economy companies that are taking advantage of this basic Benjamin Button philosophy around the incredible shareholder value that it can drive. Under Armour has spent about $500 million on fitness apps that encourages people to share their workouts with their friends and create these small cohorts. And you inspire each other, and you gamify it, and you challenge each other, and you communicate the mile you did that morning. It shows the route, it shows your time, it shows your average minutes per mile, calories burned, and then challenges the rest of your cohort to beat it. It's attempting to take a technology and encourage people that if you use this product from Under Armour, we all get better, our product gets better, and we begin to age in reverse. Fast fashion. Fast fashion, if you will, is a form of intelligence, and that is they send out these receptors, specifically phone cameras, to high-density fashion areas all over the world, mostly fashion shows. They take a ton of pictures, and they're able to get it to a design studio, to a cutting room, to a manufacturing facility, and on their shelves within 7 or 8 weeks versus 7 or 8 months for traditional apparel manufacturers. When you think about this, this is really receptors and intelligence to absolutely collapse the supply chain. People like to blame Amazon in apparel. I sit on the board of some apparel companies. I'm fairly involved with apparel companies. I'm in a lot of board meetings. And people talk about Amazon the way they talk about their genetics. Now, what do we mean by that? The likelihood of you making it to 100 years of age has several factors. Number one, I'll go in reverse. Number 3 is your genetics. People think genetics is number 1. When you ask people, what are the primary reasons, what's the biggest reason that indicates how long you're going to live, they say, it's my genetics. Uncle Bob lived to 105. It's actually not. Your genetics are a lot less important than you likely think they are in terms of your longevity. Why do we think that? It gives us comfort to think that the die have been cast, and regardless of how poorly we treat our bodies, that somehow it's predetermined how long we're going to live. It's not. Number 2 is lifestyle. In sum, don't be obese and don't smoke, and you screen out 2/3 of premature cancers and cardiovascular disease. But the number 1 signal of whether or not you're going to make it to triple digits, how social you are, or specifically how many people you take care of and how many people do you love. If your parents move in with you, your life expectancy goes up 3 to 5 years. The act of caregiving requires a certain nuance, physical and mental activity that sends out a hormone that clears out the bad cholesterol. New mothers don't die. Reason I bring this up, every apparel company in America right now is talking about Amazon the way they talk about genetics as it relates to longevity. And that is they want to blame Amazon for everything. If you look at apparel retailers and you look at the ecosystem, the company or the sector that's disrupting them is actually fast fashion. Fast fashion has grown its top line revenue more in the last 5 years than Amazon has grown their apparel offering. So these companies are being disrupted, but they're being disrupted by their own who are just better than they are, that have taken this intelligence and receptors and collapsed the supply chain. So everybody says, oh, it's Amazon. It's like, no, it's you. It's you. You're just not as good as other people doing the same thing and doing it better. So we talked about winners. Let's talk about losers. I think the biggest loser in an algorithmically driven economy or world is reason. And the reason why reason is a loser is that the algorithm's job is to figure out if you're a 0 or 1. Binary is still the most efficient way to process data. So all the algorithms in my life, and I would argue all the algorithms in the lives of people who live in Manhattan, their job, the algorithm's job is to figure out if you're a conservative or progressive. If you spend a lot of time reading the news or on politics websites, which I do, I'm a bit of a political junkie, the algorithm's immediately like, okay, is this guy a conservative or a progressive? And it's clicking on articles about Hillary or Bernie Sanders or Obamacare, and it says, okay. And then it goes, oh, we see that Scott on Facebook's profile went to Berkeley. Okay, tree hugger, right? And then it starts serving me more progressive articles, because the idea of the algorithm is to figure out a way to get me to click on more stuff such that it can serve me more ads and the people who own the algorithm can make more money, full stop. I get more progressive articles, and I become more progressive. And I begin clicking on more and more progressive stuff. And slowly but surely, I would argue the algorithm does its job, figures out who I am, and as a function of trying to get more advertising, pushes me further and further to one pole. I was on the board of the New York Times for a couple years, and we took a lot of pride in, on a regular basis, offering a conservative viewpoint. We hired really thoughtful conservative journalists because we thought it was important and people would benefit from some balance in their lives. At NYU, we force kids to take classes they don't want to take, especially as undergrads, because we think some balance and exploration in their life is a good thing. The algorithm isn't concerned with your balance. It isn't concerned with your perspective. It moves you to one pole or the other as quickly as possible. And we are becoming more polarized. This is an adjustment or an assessment of how polarized these three candidates were just 10 years ago. If you looked at their views 10 years ago, all three of these people were actually considered moderates. And then as you track their speeches and their policy rhetoric, this happens. Now, have they really become more polarized? Or is it because they realize in order to get elected, in order to resonate with people, they have to go to one pole or the other? Because I believe algorithms are driving all of us to one pole or the other. In the last election, 89% of the people who live on the island of Manhattan voted for Hillary Clinton. And that wasn't the amazing thing, although I do think that's amazing. What's amazing is among the 89%, and I was one of them, I was literally 100% sure she was going to win. I speak a lot. I travel 250,000 miles a year. I'll speak in front of about 135,000 people this year. And I was telling everyone in Europe last year in September and October, everyone in Q&A would go, "What about your election?" And they would literally say this with fear in their voice. And I would say, "Don't worry. Just don't worry. We got this. I'm reading a ton about this. I'm super into the election. There's just no way she's not going to win." And then being in Europe, they'd all erupt in applause. It literally feels as if I can't go back there because I promised something that wasn't delivered. And I generally believe that because the algorithm, if you will, and to a certain extent my own projection around how I want the world to turn out, put me in a bubble that convinces a reasonably intelligent person of something is an impossibility when in fact it's a reality. So I think these algorithms push us to the poles and, if you will, create bubbles for each of us where we can sit in these very insular environments and not be exposed to anything that offends us. Subscription services are not intelligent. They get intelligence at one point, and then they continue serving you products at the same cadence and oftentimes in the same dosage, and you end up with a lot of stuff in your house that you don't want. I don't think subscription services yet work. Recurring revenue is super powerful, but only when it adapts to your needs. A write-down, or a fairly big write-down in retail, I think is going to be Dollar Shave Club at $1 billion acquisition by Unilever. If you look at it, they paid about $300 per customer, which is a lot of money, and they paid about $6.25 million per employee. One of the reasons they were purchased was supposedly they had this new economy way of acquiring customers, right? They could acquire consumers more intelligently. At the time of the acquisition, Dollar Shave Club was spending more on television than Gillette was spending. So this company was more old economy than we like to think. By the way, the key to valuation, other than what we were talking about, this user growth times engagement times intelligence, is really storytelling. And it's your ability to communicate or be perceived as the leader based on new economy skills. That's the key to a multiple on your valuation. And there used to be a multiple on EBITDA, but now it's a multiple on revenues. And Dollar Shave Club was able to talk Unilever into that. However, I think the largest write-down in retail, and I've been saying this for a few months, and I'm beginning to think I might have got this wrong, because I think they're doing actually pretty well. And I'm not afraid to say I'm wrong. We get it wrong all the time. Our heart's in the right place. I thought, and I still think there's a good chance, that the largest write-down is going to be Jet.com. This acquisition made no sense to me. This was an acqui-hire. Oh my God, talk about an expensive acqui-hire. They paid $12.5 million per employee. I mean, that's crazy. Multiple on revenues times 6. It was spending $5 million a week on advertising. I just can't even imagine what those board meetings were like. Just sitting there and saying, okay, we're spending $250 million a year on advertising. Well, when do we break even? If anyone on the board, and I'm sure someone had said, well, when does this company break even? Just for fun, let's talk about that. Based on their current trajectory, they were going to break even when they got to $20 billion in sales. The difference between a fraud and a visionary is a successful exit as an entrepreneur. So who are the winners in retail? Is everyone just going to die in the hands of Amazon? They're not. There are some companies that are doing okay. A lot are doing poorly, but some are doing well. And I would argue that the companies in traditional brick and mortar retail that are doing well are zigging while everyone's zagging. Everyone's trying to take people out of the equation and insert it with technology. But if you look at the guys that are doing pretty well, Sephora has their cast, Best Buy has their blue shirt, Apple's employees are very well trained, Home Depot has their golden aprons. I think they're zagging, and is that they're making a huge investment in what I would refer to as organic intelligence. People no longer go to stores for products, they go for people. Specifically, they want expertise, or they want navigation, or they want great customer service. And if you're not offering that in the form of the most sophisticated processor by far still around, specifically the gray matter between your two ears, the EQ, the intelligence, the connection we feel with people, the ability to immediately pick up on cues and get people to the right answer. If a retailer, brick and mortar, isn't investing in that, I don't think they can out Amazon for sure, and I think they're not taking advantage of people's desire to, A, congregate and get very fast answers from still the best processor in the world, and that is another individual. So, false prophets. Some people making, in our society, I believe that we have a huge need for a super being or Jesus Christ-like figures. As we develop more modern-day anxieties, more successful, more anxiety. As a nation becomes wealthier or more educated, you go to church less. There's less of a reliance on a traditional God. But at the same time, these modern-day anxieties continue to grow, right? We have just as much stress, just as many unanswered questions around the things that happen in the world. So we need sort of these gods, or we need these Jesus Christ-like figures who we trust that anything they say has got to be right. And I would argue that the new religious figures are the CEOs of successful innovation economy companies. We give them way too much credibility. We assume everything they say is the future, that they can see into the future. I think where Bezos has taken us is with one store, Amazon Go. He said that basically artificial intelligence obviates cashiers. There are 11 million cashiers in the U.S. There are more cashiers in the U.S. than there are teachers. Think about that. Think everyone you know is a teacher, there's more cashiers. Of the 11 million, I bet 3 or 4 million lost their jobs when that one Amazon Go store was open. Because, and I can attest to this personally, every boardroom of a retail company in America now is trying to figure out a way to optimize their retail, which is Latin for fire cashiers. The other Jesus Christ, and where I think he's got it hugely wrong. I think this is the biggest head fake in technology and is going to wreck venture capital firms across the US and Europe, and also be the result of hundreds of millions in write-offs from some huge technology and media companies. I think the biggest head fake in technology over the last few years is virtual reality. This is how many VR Oculus Rifts have been sold versus some other items. Any of you using VR at home? There's got to be someone. There's always one gamer. No one? Anyone using VR? I saw someone. Did someone raise their hand? This is ridiculous. And what technology firms do is it's easy for success to translate to arrogance. The decisions you make around what you wear are really complicated and really emotional and based in instinct. And tech's never understood that. One tech company kind of gets it, and that's Apple. Apple's the only one that's ever figured out a way to get someone to put something on their person. And you look and I look ridiculous in VR. And it immediately takes 90 to 95% of us will never wear one of those because we don't want to look stupid. And there aren't that many applications, or as many as we think. And the narrative around this technology is the same narrative of any great multimedia technology. It starts up here. It's going to change everything. That's where the narrative was about 24 months ago. We're already out of that narrative, and it's like, well, it's going to change business. We've moved beyond that narrative, and this is where we are right now. It's going to change niche commercial applications. And they're running articles about how someone in India can inform hip surgery at the Mayo Clinic. They're trying to come up with reasons why this actually works. It's going to change education will be the next narrative. And it's going to end up where every narrative ends up in great media technology that fails. It's going to change porn. It usually gets a bigger laugh. Google consciously decided to send this out. Another head fake, wearables. There's only one wearable. This is it. Every other wearable is going to be like a pet rock. It's going to be in your drawer. You're going to pull it out. It's going to take you back to an era when you had a Nike Fuel Band or a Jawbone or a Fitbit. Wearables are another huge head fake. "3D printing. Remember when we 2 years ago, you'd go to a conference and there'd be this, what looked like a microwave oven, spurting gel, and we'd sit there in fascination for 8 or 10 minutes and it would be a Yoda. And this was going to change the world, 3D printing. And it's an exciting vision. Anything you want, anywhere for less money, right? You have to land in Nova Scotia because your propeller has been bent or hit by a bird. You can land at a facility, and they take a picture of your Cessna and on the spot produce the propeller and put it on for less money than it would cost to get it from Textron or Cessna, right? Here's the thing, and there are some applications of that, but for the most part, the idea that a technology that we could produce a lot of stuff really inexpensively and get it really quickly, the world, specifically the US, has this unbelievable 3D printer called China. And our ability to invent a technology that is going to be a more robust printer, 3D printer, than China has been totally overestimated. And this is another technology that has stubbed its foot in a big way. Some companies, some of the most overvalued companies, and this is the slide that always gets me into trouble, and people from these companies reach out to me and invite me in to update my thinking. They always use that word, update my thinking. I think WeWork is totally overvalued. I think that's just ridiculous. WeWork right now is valued at $20 billion. And I also think Snapchat is still massively overvalued, and this data is dated. It's probably, I think it's a $22 billion market cap. Based on WeWork's $20 billion valuation, it means every person that goes into WeWork and spends $100, $200, $800 a month to office in these wonderful spaces is worth $550,000. Try and imagine that. They have to figure out a way to monetize every current customer to about $550,000. By the way, I think the guys, I know the guys at WeWork, I think it's an amazing concept. I think it's a great management team. I think it's worth maybe $1 billion, which is incredible. 20 billion? Look out below. Twitter. These are some of the people who do not work at Twitter. I think the board of Twitter is negligent and should be removed by shareholders. I think to say to somebody, she is better than you at 25 hours a week than you are at 50 hours a week is negligent and cannot, there is no way that cannot create negative morale in a management team and send absolutely the wrong signal at everybody. I've been a CEO before. I come to you with 110% certainty. It is not a part-time job, especially when thousands of people are relying on you for their livelihood, when tens of thousands of people have decided to put their hard-earned money into your stock, and you are literally competing in what is probably the highest stakes game in history, and that is who owns custody of the consumer and social media, and yet they have a part-time CEO. That is just negligent and outrageous. Now, why? Why does it happen? Because if someone is talented, which their CEO is, if someone is really impressive, which their CEO is, and that person happens to be in their 30s and wear a beard and a turtleneck, we think, oh, it's Jesus Christ risen again. It's Steve Jobs. We have this idolatry of innovators that is really unhealthy and unrealistic and damaging to basic common business sense and business maturity around shareholder value. So I made this big speech about Twitter being worth $10 a share when it was at $55, and I'm almost there. My prediction, this does not... You don't need to watch me. Watching me speak when I'm right here on video is like shit on a shit salad, so we'll avoid that. I think the biggest winner in 2017 is Netflix. If you think about the four, and what I refer to the four, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, and I will get to Amazon, I know that's why everyone is here, they're basically operating systems for a different component of our life. Amazon is operating system for consumption, Apple is operating system for media, Google is operating system for information. I think effectively Netflix has a shot at becoming the operating system of joy in our lives. And that is when we're sitting down and really enjoying ourselves in front of television. And I do think this is a golden age of television. I think television is amazing. I think the fastest way to be happier is to exercise. The second fastest way is to watch more television. I think television is wonderful. I think we're in a golden age of TV, largely brought on by the competition among the big four to spend more on original content and not litter it with bad advertising. Millennials spend more time watching Netflix than they spend watching all of broadcast and cable TV. So if millennials are the future in terms of a disposable income, then technically Netflix should be worth more than the entire broadcast ecosystem, because they control more of it. More Netflix is consumed than all of TV, all other TV combined, by millennials, and this stock has gone crazy. And I think Netflix, if I were to bet who has a chance of joining the four, I would say that it's probably going to be Netflix. incredible metrics, continue to grow users. Also, when we're talking about intelligence, I think the most genius form of this intelligence is that Netflix has an algorithm. And it knows if you're watching season 4, episode 7 of House of Cards. And based on sophisticated intelligence, it goes, we think you would like to watch season 4, episode 8. And we're going to start playing it in 10, 9, 8, 7. Think about how basic and common sense that feels right now, and how powerful it is. Who among you has ended up on a Wednesday night with an 8 a.m. meeting at 4:30 in the morning going, well, I only got 3 more hours to watch. I only have 3 more. I got to keep going. But it's that kind of basic intelligence and just simple use. And because it's streaming, they can offer you the product. ABC can't do it. Linear TV can't do it. I think to bring up your Netflix home screen is sort of an x-ray into your soul. This is my Netflix home screen. That usually gets a laugh too. So this is all war. This means I'm seriously screwed up and I have issues. I have trouble sleeping at night, which I realize might come as a shocker to you, but I find only 2 things relax me. I like to watch shows about animals and shows about crimes against humanity. That kind of puts me out to sleep. All right, so let's talk about the game of 4. At business school, the first year, we have marketing, operations, finance, and management. Those are the 4 pillars of the first year of business school. And they're outstanding disciplines. And we bring together a group of people in real estate and resources and admissions, and we put them in groups. And within about 12 months, we can take someone who's making $75,000 a year, and we can turn them into someone who's making $110,000. And that's what the marketplace tells us. The second year is mostly a waste. It's mostly a set of electives and courses on leadership and ethics, and courses that no one needs to be held accountable for because they're impossible to measure. And because we have to satisfy the teaching requirements of what is probably the most wasteful employment compact in the world, and that's tenure. We have tenured professors who we have to give an excuse to exist and pay, and so we create a second year. And we also need an excuse to charge kids $128,000 in tuition instead of $64,000. But realistically, we could punch them out in a year with no loss in value to really their currency in the marketplace. In my view, and I've proposed this, the 4 pillars of the second year should be Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. I think to understand these companies is to understand retail, media, connection, biology, and understand the intersection between value creation and our new economy. So I spend the majority of my waking hours thinking about these 4 firms and what it means for us, what we can tell about ourselves, and what insight it brings about our economy. So let's talk about Google. Google is the original gangster around this intelligence idea. Every time you search, Google gets 1/3 better. If you search hotels in Brooklyn, the algorithm is listening and will see what information you click on. And it'll immediately say, okay, if this person was searching for information on hotels in Brooklyn and found this information useful, that increases the intelligence of the algorithm, and we have a little bit better idea of what information to serve other people, what's relevant to other people with similar queries. Now, what is the role that Google plays in our life? Google is effectively a modern man's God. This void, decrease in religion, increase in desire for answers, the void is being filled by Google. For those of you who have kids, you have your planet of stuff, you have your planet of friends, you have your planet of work, and then you have your planet of kids. And when one of your kids isn't doing well, it becomes the sun, and you're flying 3 miles from the sun, and there's just nothing but your kid, specifically your kid not doing well. Everything else just kind of literally goes away. You know, will my kid be all right? I mean, what is praying? Praying is sending information up into the atmosphere, hoping that there's some divine intervention, some processing, and you get an answer and an action back. Will my kid be okay? Now it's symptoms and treatment of croup, and you get back an answer. Google is our modern man God. 1/5 of queries on Google or to Google have never been asked before in the history of mankind. What rabbi, cleric, priest, coach, professor has so much credibility that 1 in 5 questions posed to that individual have never been asked before in the history of mankind. Google is hands down the most credible super being that's ever existed in the history of mankind. As a result, it's an incredibly powerful business. And when you combine it with Facebook, you have a company that is essentially controlling media. All the growth in media, especially online media, which continues to be the growth engine across all media globally, is controlled by two companies. If you look at Facebook and Google, they control 103% of last year's digital marketing growth. So kids come to my office hours, they never want to talk about brand strategy or digital marketing, they want to talk about jobs. They're making a huge investment and they want to be thoughtful about their careers. A lot of them want to go into digital marketing. My point is very straightforward. Digital marketing is an outstanding career as long as you work for Facebook or Google. If you don't work for Facebook or Google and you're in digital marketing, you are now in an industry that is in structural decline. About 3,500 companies have raised 10 million or more in venture capital in the digital marketing ecosystem, and they join newspapers or magazines and that their business is in decline. This is what I think the marketplace looks like for digital marketing if you're not Facebook or Google. So one of those shows I was talking about on Animal Planet, one of my favorite episodes is about this Indian family that lives in rural India, and they're snake farmers. And they go out onto their property, and you see these little kids literally like this, like just not even thinking, grabbing snakes out of the bushes. And they're little 6 to 12-inch snakes that have no commercial value. And they collect 8,000 or 9,000 of these things in little buckets. And then they go back, and Dad puts all the buckets of these snakes riding around into one giant chest. And Dad puts a padlock on the chest. And they go away. And they come back several months later, and they open the chest, and there's 2 enormous snakes. That is the world, that is the ecosystem of digital marketing over the next 24 months. Anxiety, humidity, and death. I'm not here with a message of hope. Facebook. Google is God. I think Facebook is love. I think one of the wonderful things about our species is we not only have a need to be loved, we have a need to love others. And love is a function of empathy, and empathy is a function of the amount of interaction, intimacy, points of contact you have with other people. What's the most powerful form of communication in terms of establishing an emotional connection with someone? It's imagery. If someone says, there's a lion on the screen, and get out of the hallway, it takes a certain amount of time for you to process it and for you to get up and make a decision to run to the hallway. If you see a lion, you're up and out. You know immediately what to do. Imagery is super powerful, and Facebook figured this out. And Facebook is making more connections, creating more empathy, and I do think Facebook is satisfying this instinctual need to connect with people, stay in their lives, and to love people. And it's a very powerful value proposition. Now, Facebook's strategy. This was Mark Zuckerberg outlining their new strategy.
We believe a camera will be the main way that we share.
Wow. That's really unique, isn't it? I'd never heard him say that before. Where did he come up with that? 2 months earlier.
Snapchat is a camera company. It's not a social company, it's a camera company.
I don't know what went down between Mark Zuckerberg and Evan Spielman. I always got his name right. Evan Spiegel? Somebody correct me. What is it? Evan what? Evan Spiegel. I've never seen an individual in business hate another individual as much based on shareholder and capital allocation. Facebook Inc. is incorporating Snap-like features into every single product they have, even when it doesn't make any sense. I believe that Mark Zuckerberg wakes up and goes, kill Snapchat. And then as he's drifting off to sleep, the last thing he thinks is, kill Snapchat. And unfortunately, I think he's going to be successful. I think Facebook is one of the most talented, agile, well-resourced companies in the world. And when you have that company totally focused on putting another company out of business, I think they're probably going to do it. And I think there's already evidence.
Facebook has already borrowed Snap.
I think there's already evidence they are doing this. If you look at we spent a lot of time looking at the different data and content and the kind of resonance it gets. This Nike data was on both Instagram Stories and Snapchat. And as you can see, the same content is getting about 16x the views on Instagram Stories than it is on Snapchat. And we're starting to see this data across a lot of our consumer member brands, that the content they put on Stories, the content they put on Snapchat, is getting more and more traction on Instagram Stories. Instagram Stories now has more daily users than Snapchat. I think Snapchat, we are in the midst I think we're in inning 4 or 5 of Snapchat being wiped from the face of the planet. Instagram is trying to get into the algorithm business, right? They're now trying to figure out, rather than it just being 100% organic reach and you see what your friends put up when they put up, they're instituting an algorithm, which is code for we're going to start putting in front of you advertising. And we'll put just enough of your friends' content in front of you to keep you interested, but we're going to start pimping the algorithm around how we can make money, which is reasonable, but we knew it was coming. Facebook just paid, I think, a $150 million fine to the EU because they gave them false information about the WeChat acquisition. They claimed it would be technologically impossible to share data from WeChat to Facebook. And then a few months later, shocker, a breakthrough. We can now inform the Facebook algorithm and the WeChat algorithms and begin taking user data from WeChat and using it to sell more advertising on Facebook and vice versa. And the EU said, hey, you lied to us. You have to pay us $150 million. And what I would say is Facebook's an immense winner. This is a company now with $450 billion. If they can lie to a regulator, I mean an outright lie, and it costs them $150 million so they can acquire something that's strategic, isn't that just a ridiculously good deal for them? There's some ad fatigue on the Facebook platform. 14% of your content is now sponsored, which means it's an advertisement. And people are starting to integrate, or starting to engage with the ads less, which means that it looks like the Facebook core platform has a little bit run out of steam in terms of existing users and in terms of ability to serve them more ads. But Facebook is fine because they have this incredible growth vehicle called Instagram, which I would argue is the most valuable platform in the world right now. If you take the user base times the level of engagement as indicated by the percentage of the population that likes, shares, or comments on a piece of content, Instagram is already the most powerful platform in the world because it gets 10 to 15 times the engagement of Facebook and 15 to 25 times the engagement of Twitter. Facebook several months ago talked about miscalculated metrics. They overestimated the organic reach of their pages, the referral traffic to websites and mobile apps. And by the way, I have to give them some credit. They try to get out ahead of the curve on this stuff and announce when stuff is wrong and try and fix it. The only thing that I find unusual about this is that they call these mistakes. And I don't know if you've ever in a relationship, but if all the mistakes or omissions always tend to benefit one person, if all of your mistakes tend to benefit you, I would argue they're not mistakes, that they're lies. Apple. What is Apple's role? So Facebook is love, Google is God. Apple is sex. Our ability to communicate to other people, our strength, our sophistication, how attractive we are, how good our genes are, is the number 2 instinct. Your number 1 instinct, number 1 is a man. Number 1 is survival. That's it. Most of us have that box checked. Most of us are not worried every day about survival. So men go to the second instinct, and the second instinct is to procreate. And near every man in this room feels that it's his responsibility, and he's been told this for tens of millions of years, that my responsibility is to spread my seed to the 4 corners of the earth because I am so awesome. I owe it to the world. So this is not an $11,000 watch. It's a $2,800 amalgam of movement, steel, plastic, and glass that I pay $11,000 for. Because if I'm very honest with myself, I'm trying to signal to all the women in this room that if you mate with me, your children are more likely to survive than if you mate with someone wearing a Swatch watch. If you don't think you spend a ridiculous amount of high-margin dollars trying to signal this to the other sex, I would argue you're just not in touch with your own motivations and your own emotions. You may be in a monogamous relationship and you still want a Ferrari because for millions of years you've been told it's so important to be in a position to procreate with the strongest, the smartest, and the fastest. Now, it's fine to be politically incorrect about men, but it's just as interesting to be politically incorrect about women. Women's number 1 job, number 1 instinct, same as men, survival. Number 2 is procreation. but they go about it a different way. Their job is to wear $700 ergonomically impossible shoes, which make no sense at all, such that they can solicit or catalyze more inbound opportunities for seed than anyone else, and put up their much finer filter and select the strongest, smartest, and fastest seed. So it's different. One side is trying to spread their seed to the four corners of the earth. The other side is trying to pick the smartest and strongest and fastest seed. The majority of the men in this room, especially if there's alcohol involved, would sleep with the majority of the women. The majority of the women in this room would sleep with none of the men. These are the new feathers. When you have the Apple iOS in your pocket versus Android, you're communicating to potential mates that you are smarter, you are stronger, you are better educated, and you're more likely to have a random sexual encounter. If you look at a wealth map of America by operating systems, if you're in Manhattan, it is literally all iOS. You go out into the suburbs where household income drops, it lights up Android. You want to live on the coast in California, you better have an iPhone. You move into South Central or the Inland Area, Empire, or Ontario, it's all Android. There's only one signal right now that's global, and it's Apple. Apple is sex. Apple's suffering a little bit from low T. They seem to have lost some of their mojo. Greatest product company in the world, revolutionizes the world every 36 months. This really hasn't revolutionized the world. It's not a failure, it's not a success, it's somewhere in between. Best design in the world, greatest concentration of design talent in history. Is this it? Is this what we expect from Apple? So you'd argue, like, Apple's an amazing company, but their latest product innovation is sort of a little bit meh. And what Apple has pulled off is unprecedented. Because these procreation appeals to the most irrational organ, right? Most tech companies appeal to the brain. They're actually smart. Buying a faster processor at a lower price is a smart decision. You're competing with the brain. The brain will starch most margin out of business. I always say to my kids, there's three organs. There's the brain, there's the heart, and there's the genitals. You don't want to compete with the brain. Brain will starch out all margin. Rational purchases are awful businesses to be in. Grocery, fuel, terrible. P&G figured this out and said, wait, choosy moms choose Jif. You love your kids more? They tapped into the heart. The heart is much more rational than the brain and resulted in a series of products where detergents and basic liquids get 70% margin because they tapped into the heart. But wait, there's more. There's more. Outside of the big four, the companies that added the most shareholder value in the world populate the list of the wealthiest people in the world. Luxury. Luxury appeals to the genitals. Those are the most irrational organs, right? Those products have 70 or 80% margins. Apple has the operating margins of Ferrari, Hermes, and LVMH. We've never seen that in technology. At the same time, it's the low-cost producer. The best-selling iPhone, or the best-selling phone in the world, is the iPhone. So imagine a company that had the margins of Ferrari and the production volumes of Toyota, and that's what you have with Apple. We've never had a company this profitable. This quarter, Apple will make twice the profits that Amazon has made since its founding. Anyways, Apple is sex, and I've gotten my 5-minute mark, so I'm going to skip. Apple had the lead in this reverse aging around music. Remember, you could go on Apple iTunes, and just by seeing what songs have been downloaded most, you could find the 2 songs that represented the $18 in value you used to spend for an entire CD. You could get 95% of the value of an album by just buying 2 songs, based on what other people downloaded, which is a form of intelligence. Amazon, and I apologize for this last because I know a lot of people are going to. Amazon is the most disruptive firm in the largest economy in the world. I think it's going to be the first trillion-dollar company. I think the only thing stopping Amazon at this point is a regulator in Washington or Brussels. I think they're literally unstoppable at this point. More retail bankruptcies in 2017 year to date than when they were all of 16. The reckoning is finally happening. Amazon's only one factor. Stagnant middle-class wages, overstoring of America, changes in consumer preferences. It's just the perfect storm of bad things for most retailers. Malls are getting hammered. These are the companies on the left side showing that are closing. I wanted to put stores that are opening because there are some people who are still doing all right, but it is a pretty ugly environment in retail right now. What's interesting about Amazon from an investor standpoint is it's separated from the rest of companies, and that is every time a retailer goes down in price, Amazon goes up. Usually companies in the same sector trade in sympathy. But now people have assumed what's good for retail is bad for Amazon, and what's good for Amazon is bad for retail. So when Macy's announces a bad quarter, Amazon stock goes up because everyone assumes it's Amazon's fault or that Amazon is benefiting from the rest of the retail industry's pain. 44% of households own a gun, 49% own a landline phone, 51% attend church every month. I think these are the same people. Big laughs on the coast with that. Cincinnati, not so much. Not so much. 52% of households have Prime now. Think about how technology has changed. More people have opted for a technology that gets them their stuff within 48 hours and have a landline phone. 55% earn over 50K. By the way, the Prime users in those households are the same. Prime users are typically wealthy households. They look more like a Macy's shopper than a Walmart shopper. 55% voted in the election and 78% on a Christmas tree. Amazon has changed the relationship between companies and investors. And this is probably the biggest impact that Amazon's had in my world. I work in startups. And that is Amazon has replaced profits with vision and growth. They said profits don't matter. It's all about vision and growth. And this has worked its way all the way back into the ecosystem. And companies are now encouraged to pursue growth, leadership, and vision at any cost. And your losses really don't matter. Companies are no longer evaluated on EBITDA or even on their losses, but on their growth and their vision and their perceived leadership. The key is to be perceived as the leader and continue growing. And Amazon has recognized this and very smartly is never profitable, pours all its money back into the company, has paid almost no taxes, didn't pay sales taxes to 2 or 3 years ago, and as a result has a lot more capital than anybody else. The whole ecosystem is going this way now. Most recently, WeWork, break even, Snapchat, $400 million in top-line revenue, $500 million in losses, Uber, $5.5 billion in revenues, $3 billion in losses. If you want to go big, or you want to go bigger, it appears, you got to lose more and more money and just keep growing. These companies are tremendously efficient with their capital. We have huge job destruction because they can just do more with less. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. But some of the really incredible things, or scary things, about Amazon is Amazon can go to a second-degree sector when they're not even their core business. And they can show up and say, we're going to spend more money on original content this year than ABC, NBC, and HBO. This isn't even our core business. The only company spending more on original content this year is Netflix, and they just upped it because they hear Amazon's footsteps. So this is just how incredible it is. I told you I was a fan of military history. At the end of World War II, the Germans had better equipment, their soldiers were better trained, they had better leadership, they had better morale. But we had 38 gallons of gasoline for every 1 gallon of gasoline they had. Amazon is now the retailer that shows up with 38 gallons of gasoline. They can literally overwhelm any sector and almost any competitor. Amazon Media Group, I'm going to skip through this. I think their next big category is going to be CPG, and specifically grocery. As Victor talked about, I don't think grocery has innovated a great deal. I think this is literally the grim reaper of brands, or the brand age. I think Google started it, Amazon user reviews have helped killed it. Brand used to be this vessel to get us from the unknown to the known around products, right? A brand used to be shorthand. I don't know if it's a great beer, but it's from Anheuser-Busch, so it's probably okay, so I'll try it. I don't know if the Four Seasons is the best hotel, but I know they'll give me at least an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10. Now you can go on TripAdvisor, Hotels Tonight, or on your own social graph, and you can find that the Ham Yard or the Soho Hotel is probably a better hotel for you in London, and have the confidence to book things that are not traditional brands. The long tail has new growth, and the traditional brand and the margin they're used to getting for this shorthand is being starched out, and it's being starched out by Amazon, Google, and I think voice is going to be incredibly powerful. Most people are not using voice for consumption, but they will. That's how Amazon makes money. Amazon will start subsidizing products and getting people to buy stuff via voice. Right now, when you ask for gain on Alexa, it's cheaper than if you get it on the Amazon platform, so it looks as if they're starting to subsidize purchases on Alexa. By the way, full disclosure, we went on yesterday, we're barking at Alexa 1,000 times a day in our office trying to get information. It was more expensive. I don't know what that means, but most of the time it's less. In this instance, it was a full 33% less via voice. When you try and buy batteries on Amazon, it makes 2 recommendations, and then it says it's out of ideas. Alexa's not out of ideas. There's a bunch of different brands on Amazon. They've just decided if you can't see what's available, they can be a little bit more generous in terms of proposing what they want. So think about how frightening this is for CPG brands. They've spent billions of dollars in generations on eye level. They have a nice, young, talented graduate of UCLA or of University of Michigan going in who's nice and attractive, establishing a rapport with the shop owner and getting them to put Tide at eye level. They spend tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, on packaging, on price optimization, on design. All of this literally on end caps. There's Tom Brady. Oh, Tom Brady's cool. I love Bud Light, right? All of that with voice goes away. All the traditional levers of brand equity disappear with voice. And the number of brands being used as a prefix for a Google search or a voice query every day goes down. And the number of people who can name their favorite brand across luxury, retail, jewelry, hotels has declined between 20 and 40% just in the last 3 years. We are experiencing the death of brand. Amazon is conspiring with 500 million consumers, fanatical investors that give it infinite capital, to starch all the margin from brands and give it back to consumers. It's great for consumers, it's great for Amazon shareholders, and it's terrible for CPG and manufacturers' brands. Where do I think Amazon's headed? I think they're going to launch something called Prime Squared. I have no inside information here. This is just pure conjecture what I would be doing if I were Amazon. And that is I would be leveraging the fact that I have this fulfillment infrastructure that has a warehouse within 20 miles of 45% of the US population. I have more purchase history than anyone on the planet. I have an incredible brand known for value. And I'm going to start saying to people, tell you what, enter Prime Squared, and we're going to send you 2 boxes twice a month. 1 box is going to have the stuff in it we think you want. The second box is going to be empty. You put the stuff you don't want back in the second box, and the algorithm will start learning. And every week, the box you put stuff back in will get smaller and smaller. And we're going to use Amazon Alexa to calibrate. Alexa, barbecue for 6 people. Alexa, going on vacation for 2 weeks. Alexa, 3 quotes for auto insurance for a Toyota Camry 2014. And I think Amazon is basically going to say, you don't need any other retailers. You only need one, and they're going to take these Prime Squared households from $1,300 a year, which is what Prime gets, to $7,000 or $8,000. The stock's going to become anti-gravity, and we're going to have our first trillion-dollar company. So my last thing here, I think the pecking order is going to change in terms of value. My kids will lure me into their room. They love Alexa. Anyone who doesn't have Alexa should get it. And they will ask Alexa, who is Scott Galloway? And look at me to get my reaction, because this is what we get.
Voice-based technologies are taking over the world. Alexa, who is Scott Galloway?
Scott Robert Galloway is an Australian professional football player who plays as a fullback for Central Coast Mariners in the A-League.
Really?
This never gets old. My kids, I pretend to be massively disappointed, and my 6 and my 9-year-old literally writhe on the ground in joy. I think it's the funniest thing in the world. And I did this video, and a kid showed up, a 17-year-old, I tracked him down, said, this is my gift to you, love your videos. And he created a Wikipedia page for me. And now, and this happened 3 weeks ago, this is the most rewarding thing about what I do. My kids lure me in for their big Amazon Alexa joke before they go to sleep on a Sunday night. And this is what happens. Alexa, who is Scott Galloway?
Everyone has their own views on that question.
That is so true. Not the answer I was expecting. Alexa, who is Scott Galloway?
Scott Galloway is a clinical professor of marketing at the New York University Stern School of Business, public speaker, and entrepreneur.
Boom! My name is Scott Galloway. I teach at NYU, and I appreciate your time today.